All right, I think we're ready to get started here. So again, my name is Rick Wilson with Martin Associates, and thanks for taking the time out today to join us again for the Sage Partner Cloud presentation. Hopefully things are getting back to normal for your businesses. So glad to have you on the webinar today. So as I said, the presentation's on Sage Partner Cloud. Sage Partner Cloud powered by Azure, which you'll learn about more in the next couple of minutes here. Makes it easy to accelerate your move to the cloud so you can access your system anywhere on a secure, reliable platform. So that's what we're talking about today. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. The presentation's being recorded, and we'll send a link out to everybody that's registered so you can view that later as well. As far as questions that you might have, you can use the Zoom chat or Q&A feature. We plan to answer all the questions that come up at the end of the content here. And moving on to our presenter. So Brett Penzinger, he's a longtime project manager here at Martin Associates, been with us 20 years or so with 20 years of Sage experience. So I think he started when he was 12. But anyway, Brett will be presenting today. So Brett, I think you can take it away.
Thanks, Rick. I think I was actually 20.
Okay.
I think that was my. I think that's when I started.
All right. Thanks,
so some agenda items. So we're going to talk about what Sage Partner Cloud is. I know everyone's seen Sage marketing material over the year. You've seen Sage 100 in cloud, and what that meant in the past. Now, what we're going to be talking about today is an actual Sage 100 cloud hosting solution. So, if that's the content that you've been waiting for the last couple of years, this is the right place. So we're going to talk about Microsoft Azure. The platform is powered by Azure, so we'll go into some details there. We'll go through benefits, details. Who would we recommend that system for? And if you decide to go, if you decide to make that jump, what would a typical migration process look like? Not going to go through every little step, just going to hit some of the high level stuff, just so you can kind of get an understanding of, how quickly, how easily, and what types of steps are going to be involved. We, as part of this, we did provision ourselves our own sort of client portal with some demo data in it. So we do have an official system that's running. So I'll get into that, show you how we're going to access it, how you would access it. We'll wrap it up at the end with pricing. What does your pricing change with Sage? What does the hosting fees look like with us? And then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. With content like this, we're sort of planning for the possibility of a lot of questions at the end. So I'm going to try to leave enough room at the end to handle all your questions. So introduction to Sage Partner Cloud. What does that term mean? What is it? Why does it say Partner Cloud? What's our relationship in this? So what Sage did is they worked with both Microsoft and some cloud hosting providers to come up with a simple way for resellers like ourselves to deploy the Sage 100 basically in an Azure data center. So what that really means is out in Microsoft Azure data center, there is a Windows virtual server with your Sage 100 data on it. More than likely, you're probably running some virtual servers currently. It's just an on-premise virtual server. It's the same type of thing. It's hosted in an Azure data center and not your office. The one thing that you can be assured of is that it's the same Sage 100 application. It's not a different interface. How you access it is going to be a little bit different. But as far as the menus, as far as your workflow, as far as your reports, your data, any custom reporting, all that stays exactly the same. How they do that is by using a remote desktop web client. If you're familiar with remote desktop or RDP or the term terminal services, these technologies have been around for years. You might even be using it without knowing that you're using it potentially. It's the same type of technology. It's just going to run in your web browser versus an actual remote desktop client. So Microsoft Azure, if you're not familiar with what that term is, it's very similar to Amazon Web Services or AWS. It's Microsoft's same version of that. It's all stored in Microsoft's data centers. So this isn't something that Martin Associates has a whole bunch of rack space in our office. It's in the Microsoft. It's in the Microsoft ecosystem. What it allows us to do, you can do a lot more with Azure, but what we're talking about today is we're talking about creating Windows Server VMs in the cloud. So like I mentioned before, the same type of VM that you would create on your on-premise server, we would be doing that just in the data center. It runs off the same background infrastructure as Office 365. I would assume most folks on the call, if they don't use Office 365, which a majority of our customers do, they've at least heard of it or looked at going into that platform. So a lot of people made, within the last 10 years, maybe a little bit longer ago, they made the jump from hosting their email in an Exchange server at their office. They made the jump to Office 365. This is the same type of thing. We're looking at, taking what machines are hosting our Sage 100 server and moving that into the same infrastructure. Just some key things that I just screenshotted from, the Azure website. 95% of Fortune 500 companies trust this technology. Another, I think, interesting fact, Microsoft spends a lot of money on this. So $1 billion annually is spent in security and R&D in this environment. It's a constantly evolving, constantly improving system. So benefits of the Sage partner, the Sage partner hosting is, again, it's on the Azure technology infrastructure. It's going to be available in your web browser. So this does open up the ability to use Sage in situations that you might not have normally used it. So things like certainly a Windows desktop, Windows laptop is going to work. If you had a Mac, for instance, that you wanted to connect to from your house, you could use a Mac. I've seen it run on an iPad. Presumably, you could use it on a phone. Would I want to enter a sales order or a cash receipt using my phone? Probably not. But if I needed to get in and grab a key piece of data while the only thing that I have in my hand is my phone, you could do that. From a reliability standpoint, high availability, limited downtime. So we're looking at 99.9% uptime, upwards to 99.99% uptime, which is an extremely high uptime. Like I mentioned before, with the switch to Office 365, the whole concept of uptime, as people were nervous about someone else hosting and being in charge in some other machine that you can't physically walk up to and touch, as people were nervous about that switch when they were talking about their email, their Exchange server. Uptime was talked about quite a bit. And I think most people that have switched to Office 365 have come to find out that it's up far more often, and it's available far more often than their internally hosted Exchange server ever was. It was very typical back in the Exchange days that you might have to take the Exchange machine down for an afternoon or a whole day. And as soon as you do that, you're outside of the 99% uptimes. And here we're talking about very, very close to 100% uptime. So if you're familiar with how reliable your Office 365 has been, if you do use that, we're looking at the same reliability here. So scalability. So there are 4 different server sizes that it starts out small for a couple user system, and it grows to being able to hold 50, 70 plus user systems on the server. So those are scalable. Those are scalable while you're using it, right? So it's very easy to go from one server and give it more horsepower. These are things that you could potentially do in a virtual server on-premise solution, but you are kind of limited to what that server has. I mean, the server that you might have, it might have a couple of virtual servers. You're probably already using the resources. It is possible to increase your Sage, what cores it uses, how much RAM it uses, but that normally means we gotta rob from another server that we're running. When you're talking about having things in a data center, there's no such limitation. We can always add more cores. We can always add more RAM, more hard drive space, things like that. It's secure. So not only are we talking about all the security levels that exist inside of just Azure's data centers and all the things that they do and all the monitoring that they do, but you're going to access this site, and I'm going to show you this here pretty shortly. You're going to access this site through a Sage portal. That's going to require a Sage ID for you to get basically from the Sage portal over to the actual Sage 100 system. And that requires two-factor, multi-factor authentication. So you even have that extra layer on top of the Azure security layers. Beyond that, automatic backups. Their backups included with the solution. So the things that you get out of the box is the last 7 days. You get a backup. And when I say backup, I'm not talking about like files, the Mass 90 folder, the Sage 100 folders. I'm talking about a full image backup. So you get one every day automatically. You have one at the beginning of the month, and you have one at the beginning of the year that you can restore to, as well as if you wanted to make your own custom backup. Let's say you're going to be doing a third-party ISV install like an Avalara, and you just wanted to make a quick backup as a check mark. I want to make a backup before I get started in case something does happen during that process. You can make a full image backup, install Avalara. If for whatever reason something did happen, you can restore. So who are we recommending this for at this time? So the system, like I said, is built robust enough to hold very, very large systems. Us being Martin Associates, what we're looking at doing is rolling out for systems that are 15 users or less. These are the standard and advanced versions of Sage. So there's also a premium version of Sage. Looks and feels just like standard and advanced, but the data is stored in a SQL server. That's coming. They're working on that right now. It's not currently offered. So if you're on premium, it will get to that point in the near future. Right now, we're looking at 15 users standard or advanced system. It does support enhancements. It does support ISVs. The ISVs that they've tested and that are assured to work right now are the Sage sponsored ISVs. So these are the ones that, if you go to the Sage website and you look at sort of the marketplace, the ones that they sort of are platinum, gold sponsored, those are the ones that they've gone through and they tested to make sure that they're going to work. That being said, from an enhancement and other third parties, this is really just a Windows server that's hosted somewhere else. At the end of the day, it's still just a Windows server. We fully expect all, just enhancements. Things like if you had a extended invoice number, or maybe you're extending your decimal places, or maybe a lot serial enhancement. Those should all work. We'll work with you. We'll test with you just to make sure that they do. We don't anticipate there to be any problems. When we talk about some of the larger ISVs, like the Scancos, the ScanForces, the Avaleras, those are solutions that the Sage server has to go and it's got to communicate with Avalera servers or Scanco servers, for instance. All that stuff should work, but because you're in a secure data center, there's a little bit of extra work that we have to do to make sure that the machines are talking to each other the way that they're supposed to be. So all those problems are solvable. Right now, they're working on the Sage sponsored ones. The list of ISVs is growing. So don't be concerned if you do have a third party. Don't be concerned if you have a enhancements that we or someone else wrote. Just check with us. We'll go through that with you to make sure you're a good candidate. Also, if you're already looking to replace your current hardware, so in a typical Sage upgrade maintenance environment, we're looking to upgrade folks every 2 to 3 years. Every time we go into one of those projects, we're always asking the same questions. Is the server that is the operating system that Sage is on, does it support the new version of Sage? Right now, for instance, the newest versions, 2020 update 1 is the latest version. We look at those requirements. Are we able to run it on the same server that your current version of Sage is running on? If the answer is no, well, okay. Can we spin up a new virtual machine? Do we have enough headroom? Do we have enough resources, either temporary or permanent, to create a new virtual environment on the same virtual server farm? So if the answer to that is yes, is it powerful enough? Does that virtual environment support the new version of Windows? Do we have enough CPU and RAM resources to run the newest version of both Windows and Sage? So we're always looking at that. Eventually, with every server, you come to a point where, we got to really look at investing in new hardware. When we're at that point, or maybe even a little bit before that point, we could start asking ourselves, well, is this something that we even want to monitor, we want to have in some server room in the first place? What is it going to look like to take that server and just put it somewhere else? Expanded remote workforce. So in the things that COVID and quarantine taught us is, we got to be prepared at really any point in time that the entire workforce might have to work from home. There was a period of time about a year and a half ago, I was having this conversation, if not every day, every other day, of how do I get to my Sage data when I'm not in the office? What sort of things do I need to do? Do I need to get a VPN? What does that look like? Can I use what sort of tools can I use to log into my desktop at work? This is a solution that solves that problem. Not only are we concerned now about the whole workforce going home, but we got notes today from one of our vendors that we were going to meet with that he couldn't meet with us anymore because his kids immediately for the next 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of school, kids are going to be home. So he had to cancel some plans. He couldn't meet with us. So he's going to be working from home for the next week. So individual employees are going to have some needs from time to time to have to work remote, as well as the whole concept of, you're running a small fever, you're not feeling the best. I'm just going to bear down and go into the office and potentially get everyone else sick while I'm toughing it out. People were asking those folks to stay at home, and we're at home. We can give them as this as a way to still be able to do their job. And I hit on this before with the backups, disaster recovery. If we want to get away from having tapes that we put in a box and then that box has to go home with someone every day or every week, and we want to go to something more electronic and something automatic, this is certainly a way to achieve that. So the Sage provisioning portal. This is a tool, and this is the tool that Sage gives us as resellers, and you even have access. You would even have access to this as an administrative end user to use this provisioning portal to do certain things with that Azure server. So, as part of this, Martin Associates, even though it is hosted in Azure's data center, the people that maintain it, is us. So we maintain the Azure site in our Office 365 portal, for instance. So typically, if we wanted to do this before the provisioning portal came out, we always had the ability to, and even if you're an Office 365 user, you have the ability to go out and make a Azure virtual machine. That's the latest and greatest Windows server. You would quickly find out if you try to do that. As you try to set that up, there's 100 different options to choose from. Each one of those options changes how the server's going to work. Each one of those options affects pricing. Your eyes will immediately go cross-eyed, and what does all this mean? What do I need? What do I don't need? If you are going to do that, you really need to be almost a certified expert in and knowing what to do and how to do it. And that's why Sage worked with both Microsoft and hosting providers to come up with a solution that gives us the ability to, with just clicking a couple buttons, we get the end result is a Windows server. It's already set up. It's already patched. The firewall rules are already there. It's already set for remote connectivity through the Sage, through the Sage portal. Sage is already installed. The software is configured to work in Sage in the most optimized environment that it can. It's basically just an empty Sage that's just waiting for your data to get loaded into it. So instead of having to go through a laundry list of options and checking a whole bunch of checkboxes and installing a Windows server and going through all those steps, that's already done for you. It's just basically a Windows server that's just waiting for us to load Sage data. One of the ways that we can maintain that is through the provisioning portal. So that's how we're going to, we can easily make backups, restore from backups. We can add users, create additional logins. And in addition to that, you as an administrative end user have certain access to that as well. So you'll be able to add users. If you have a new hire, you don't have to call us to add them to the system. There's certain things that you can do yourselves. And with all the backups that I've been talking about, that is something as an end user you can do as well. So this screenshot here is an example of how you would look at the provisioning portal as an administrative end user. So what we did as part of this is Martin Associates, the reseller, created a site for a fake Martin and Associates customer. So this is me logged in as the Martin and Associates customer, looking at the site. So the things that I can do, I can assign users. I can change how they're going to access the system. And then you can see up in the top corner as well, I've got the ability, if I wanted to make a snapshot right here now, I could. If I wanted to restore from a snapshot, I could as well. So migration, what does it take to go from your on-premise solution that's in your office? How do we get from there to here? So the very first step, I didn't list, but we would work with you to make sure that we look at your system, look at the third parties, if there are any, look at enhancements, and just make sure we think you're a good candidate. And in most cases, there's not really going to be that many limitations that would prevent you from doing this switch. So we would do a change to your Sage 100 license. Your current renewal will say something like Sage 100 or Sage 100C, Sage 100 Cloud. That would go, the name of that renewal will go to Sage 100 Partner Cloud, and there is some pricing changes with that that I'll talk about towards the end. The next thing that we do is we get a subscription from a Microsoft partner. So we basically get the placeholder for the server that's going to exist. And then begins a process that we both load the site, tie the site to your Sage account, and start getting that site ready. Because it's all cloud hosted, you basically have a lot of confirmations. It's very email happy. So I do have a note on this step. Plan to spend about an hour with us going through all the different confirmations, going through all the different checklists, creating the accounts, creating your account as an administrative end user. It's not hard. It's just a lot of emails that you get. You get an email, you click a link, you log in, and you say confirm. You get an email, you get a link. You might create a login. You might create a two-factor authentication method. So it is a lot of back and forth. When I did it, it was a little bit more confusing because I was doing it as myself as the partner and as myself as the end user. So I had to keep a bunch of windows open on two different monitors to keep everything in track. But it's going to be basically the same process. I do some things in the provisioning portal. You confirm it. It comes back to me. I do a couple of steps, and it would go back to you. Process took about an hour. Once that's done, it does take a little bit for the server to be created. I think it was like an hour or two after that before the machine is actually ready. And at that point in time, we could do two things. We definitely want to start adding all the different logins to the system. Before we get too much further, before we get to the last step there, we do want to make sure we've assigned Sage IDs to anyone that's going to log into the system. During that time, we can also start just the upload of your Sage 100 data. This is nothing more than just a big, large copy and paste job, right? So it's just, it takes a little bit of time as well, probably somewhere around 2 hours for that data to copy, and then it's going to be up there. It's going to be up. The data is going to be up on the server. We do have to go through a final step, which is a migration step. It's a similar step to what we do when we do typical Sage upgrades, but the one difference is at the very end, and this is why it's important to create the Sage IDs. You do have to tie Sage IDs to Sage logins, and that's basically the last step. At that point in time, everyone that's able to log in will get an email that says you're ready to access the site. So before I jump into the demo, I'm going to talk about some differences here. The first difference I just alluded to, you no longer have a Sage login. The Sage system that is provisioned uses unified login. So it's going to be tied to your Sage ID. So if you're logging in right now to to Sage with your initials or maybe first name, last name, that goes away. That gets moved over to a Sage ID. And one of the benefits there is that you never actually, you log into the Sage portal, Sage is already ready to be logged in for you. You never actually see a Sage login again. The one thing, and I will say the one thing I don't necessarily like about the system is getting files up to the server and down and downloading files. It's possible to do it. It's certainly different. I would fully expect this to be improved on as they do more rollouts. And there's also other solutions that we could put on top of it that would just makes it easier to get your files, maybe a PDF that you created, if you do want to pull that PDF down to your local system, to make that easier. Finally, the web RDP access, it's slightly different than a standard desktop environment. You are in a web browser. Things like if you hit your back button, it's going to try to go back a page. It's going to warn you that you're trying to do that. So it is a web page. It's going to at some level act like a web page. If you close your Sage launcher, you do have to back out and then re-log in to the portal, depending on which Sage access method that you're choosing. With that being said, I'm going to jump over to the demo. And just for instance, I will show you this. This is the basic provisioning portal that we see. Some additional things that we can do. We can use this screen to quickly and easily just change the virtual machine size. If we wanted to turn it down or lock it, keep users out of it, we certainly can. There's some repair tools that we have as well. So we're using the same provisioning portal that you're using. We've got a couple extra features. I'm going to completely log out of that and show you what it looks like from a login standpoint. Oh, I should probably log out. So when you first access the system, you're going to see this. This is my Sage ID. So when you go to access the system, it's going to look like this. I'm going to say login. Again, it is a web browser. I'm going to make that be a little bit bigger. And you're going to see potentially these three options, Sage 100, data drive, and virtual machine access. So the virtual machine, I'm going to start here and kind of work backwards. So if I log in here, what it's going to do, it's going to both log me in. Well, this one is going to just log me into the web RDP. It takes a couple seconds, and then you're going to see I've got a full-fledged RDP in the web. I got a start menu. I've got Chrome potentially. If I wanted to load things like Office and Excel on here, I could. I'll talk about licensing, how to license that a little bit later. But I also have a Sage 100 icon. So one of the things you're going to notice as it's logging in here, you're going to see that I don't have a login. It auto logged in for me. This should be very similar to a Sage system that you're using today. If you're on a version that's, let's say, 2017 and below, or even 2018, you've got the ability to use the old launcher. That's pretty much gone away on-premise or cloud, whichever flavor, around 2020. So the 2020, the version I'm in right now is 2021 PU1. So it's using the modern. It is using the modern launcher, and you're going to see, just like an RDP environment, I'm able to access information here. I got customer maintenance. I can do my lookups. All the same tasks that you can do. It's the point I'm trying to make. It's the same interface that you're used to today. You don't have to retrain anybody. From a report standpoint, I can all my reports are there. as well. And from a speed standpoint, there's a little bit of hesitation when I first log in, but once I start using the system, it performs as well as a virtual machine that's running on your running on premise. And this, for example, this is the lowest sized version that is available. So I've got this running on what I'm going to call the small server. I'm going to show you what. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to go back to my applications here, and I'm going to open up Sage 100. So when you give a user access, you can say you either want them to use the RDP access, which is what I just showed you, or the browser mode. So the difference between it is it's going to be very, very similar. It uses the same technology. You'll just notice that I don't have the desktop's all blacked out. I don't have a start bar. The only thing I have access to is Sage 100. I don't have access to any other applications on this. I'm just saying I'm giving this user login rights, and the only thing that they can do is use Sage. Other than that, the same things that I just did in the RDP access window, I'm doing here. I can still I've basically saying, hey, I'm granting this user, and I'm only granting them I'm granting them access to the machine in this application only. The last option is the data drive. This is what you would use if you wanted to put files up and pull files down. So this is the window that you would use if you wanted to pull files off the server. Not as clean and simple as I would like, but certainly Sage is going to offer some improvement there, as well as there's certain things that we can do from that standpoint. I will say, if you're who would use what, if it's a power user that's going to be doing potentially other applications, or they're going to be using Excel, they might be doing a couple other things on the environment itself. You would give them access to the whole RDP environment, and just standard data entry folks, I would think would be fine with just the Sage 100 application being shared. On to pricing. So there's two different pricing changes that would happen. So the one is your price to Sage is different. So you're going to be changing your subscription to Sage 100 to Sage 100 Partner Cloud. There's also, and the next slide I'll talk about, our hosting fees, which are separate. So the very first thing is the Sage Partner Cloud licensing structure. What we're doing here is we're comparing, the two of the different offerings from, your current subscription to what it would look like in Sage Partner Cloud. So we've got essentials compared to financials. They're the same thing. When I'm talking about the essential version versus the financial version, it really just means core accounting, AR, AP, GL. So if you're one of those end users, if you're going to add a user, you're looking at $857 per user annually. So if you're on core accounting, you would expect that to go up about $100 per user annually. The complete edition is the same thing as the financials and operations edition. That means core accounting plus distribution. So inventory, purchase order, sales order. There you would be, if you're adding a user, you'd be looking at $1,100 going up to $1,292. So an increase of about $150. That being said, They're currently running a promotion. Granted, it does end here in a couple months. That the first year is 25% off. The second year is 15% off. That puts that first year at right at or below your the current cost of the standard subscription. Now that deal does end on 9/30. Do we know what's going to happen October 1st? No, but oftentimes Sage does make these promotions available for a couple quarters in a row, if not a whole year in a row. No promises of what they're going to do, but typically in the past we've seen them keep rolling promotions forward for the first couple quarters. So that's your portion with Sage. So that's your Sage licensing structure change. And then from the sorry, I'm gonna go full screen mode here. So from the Azure hosting, 65 per user per month. That would be your hosting fees with us. So with that minimum of 3 users, we can't really provision a single user system in a cost-effective manner. At 3 users and above, it's no problem. So things that you get: automated backups that we talked about, 256 gigabytes of disk space. With that, with our customers, our on-premise customers that we handle their IT, we're currently doing, we've got server monitoring tools with, that we can control when Windows updates happen and when those roll out. That's going to be included with this. So it's not, Windows isn't just going to update and restart on you in the middle of the day. We can control when that happens. And, we get alerts of if there is a problem with that virtual server. So all that's included. I will make a note that if you do want to use Office and Excel, you certainly can. If you already have Office 365, you might just be able to use that edition. There's a whole host of flavors of Office 365 and what rules you have when and where you can use them elsewhere outside of your office. Potentially, what you have can just get used here. Potentially, you might have to, your Office 365 subscription would have to go up a little bit per user that's going to plan to use Excel in this environment. And if you don't have Office 365 at all and you want to use that, you would have to get specific licenses here. The last note is the $65 per user is getting you the server edition that fits the user size. If for whatever reason you need to throw a whole bunch of extra applications on top of that, a whole bunch of third parties, and it's eating up server resources, and we do have to give you a little bit more horsepower, that is certainly something that we could do, and we would just look at that from a case-by-case basis and just adjust that $65 per user up to something that makes sense with the extra horsepower that you need. With that, I think we're ready for Q&A.
Yep. So thanks a lot, Brett. That was good stuff. There is a question in here. Are you able to copy and paste from the local machine into the virtual machine in RDP environment?
So you're talking about your clipboard there, I would think is what you're talking about.
I think so. I was just asking to copy and paste.
Yeah, you can. If that's how I installed license keys and stuff like that. So you can.
All right. Let me see here. There's one in here about how can we test, how the system is working before switching to Sage Partner Cloud? I guess, can you do that?
So certainly, you would have an opportunity to test the system before you would go live, but before you would switch your Sage subscription, we would probably need to provision an extra portal like we did for this demo data. we would, it's possible for us to make one of those environments and just have it running for running for a couple, like a month or so. I guess we haven't thought about what the cost associated with that would be, because I mean, it is going to be resources. Microsoft is going to be charging us for that. But certainly we could do that. What the dollar figure for that is, not sure, but it's something we could work out.
Gotcha. There's a question here about whether you have to be on a certain version of Sage.
Yeah. So the versions that you can provision are 2019, 2020, and 2021. That shouldn't be a limiting factor for anyone that's looking to migrate to the cloud, because one of the steps that I detailed is that last step, the migration. That migration would take care of you if you were already on 2021 and you wanted to move to cloud 2021. We would go through a migration step. It's literally the same migration steps if you were on 2015, 2016, for instance. So what you could do is, you could look at this as being a Sage upgrade at the same time, because it's, the migration is really no different whether you're on an older version or the same version.
Gotcha. There's a question here about Azure users versus the Sage users, and can those user counts be different?
So only the folks that have access to the portal. So if we go back up, actually, I'll pull it up in here. So only the users that are listed here would be able to log into the RDP environment, and those users all get tied to a specific Sage user. So if you have, let's say, a 10 user system and you only had, say, like 7 users that use it day in and day out, you would create 7 users here and you would have 7 Sage users. I don't know what you would do on the server if you weren't a Sage user. I guess we could potentially, make other applications available on that server, and maybe you would use the RDP access to access those applications. I mean, that's theoretically possible. But if the question is, could you have a different number of hosting users versus what you're paying for Sage? Yes. Right. So your Sage is concurrently structured. So you could have a 10 user system and have 15 users, but only 10 are logged in at the same time. You can do the same thing. Our hosting fees would really be what you would expect to have logged into the server. Having users doesn't itself eat up resources. It's having users logged into the system doing things eats up resources. So we just want to make sure we're hosting the right machine size that can hold the number of users that are going to be actively using the system
at the same time.
Right. So
So another way of saying this long list of users could be long, but if that list was 15 users, with their logins and emails and everything, but if you only had a 7 user system, we only have to size it. I'm sorry, a 7 user Sage license, then we don't need to be sizing it for 7, because what are the other people going to do anyway?
Yes, they would log in and they would get a message that's saying, you can't do anything because you don't have any Sage licenses.
Right.
Gotcha. Now, if we wanted to in the future make the machine available to do other things besides Sage, that is technically something that we could do. Then we would be hosting with different licenses that than what your Sage has. But yeah, you can. We're going to follow the same sort of concurrent model that Sage has.
Right, and then I guess we got one last one here. What if I wanted to move back to an on-premise server in the future someday?
You can. It's just it's just a directory. So I showed the sort of file upload download. The same way that I took demo data, or I would take customers' data and copied it and pasted it up. It's still just a Mass90 directory that's sitting on a server. You could FTP it off. You could use their download tools, some other custom download tool to pull it down. There's really no limitations. You would then have to request a license change with Sage to go back
right.
to the old version. But yeah, from a technical standpoint, there's a little bit. It's just the only thing you're going to be waiting on is the large copy and paste job that goes through the wire, so to speak.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all the questions that I see out here. So Brett, thanks a lot for going through all that. This is kind of new for Sage, and so we'll help you through it out there. You can always contact your account manager at Sage that helps you with your system, or if you have a direct question for Brett or I, just let us know. And so I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks again for everybody's time. Hopefully you thought it was worthwhile. And like I said earlier, you'll be getting an email with a link to the recording, and there's a chance to follow up then as well. So, all right, thanks again, Brett.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks for everybody. Have a good day. Bye-bye.